Hello everybody and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf, and yes, to a tops and flops video. I haven't done one of those proper, not properly, but proper tops and flops in a while. Women's Prize sort of came in between, and then the mid-year stuff, and then there were months that I didn't read enough or that I didn't have anything to talk about in terms of tops and flops. But now we are back on track. And because I haven't done one of those in a while, it's 2 months, June and July. And for those of you who might be new, welcome to my channel. The tops and flops was a regular feature when at the end of each month or the beginning of the next month, I look back at my reading and I pick a couple of books that I thought were tops, and one or two books that I thought were not quite working. Sometimes it was just, no, and sometimes it was like, hate that book. I will leave the categories down below, and also a list of all the books in author alphabet order, something like that. And we'll jump right in. So the tops, nothing has changed, even though I haven't done one of those in a while. But we start with the tops, and within the tops, we start with the book that surprised me the most. And for this, I picked a classic, Lady Susan by Jane Austen, published posthumously 1871. I read this in June. It was my pick for the 12th. You remember the 12 classics that I want to read in 2023, and this was the June pick. I think the June pick. It was not the July pick. No, July was our Nick. And why did it surprise me the most? I am not a huge Jane Austen fan. I appreciate her place in the canon, in the classics. 18th century, beginning of the 19th century kind of book. I really like Persuasion, but I'm not a huge fan. So this was a pick because I haven't read it and I'm a completist. That's just how I roll. So I wanted to read Lady Susan as the last completed novel written by Jane Austen. There are also two, the Watsons and Sandition, which is not Sandition. Sandition. Why am I saying Sandition? Anyway, those two were not completed. Lady Susan is a very, very short novel, rather novella, 100 pages something, in letters. I love epistolary novels, so that was not a surprise. But the surprise was how much I enjoyed this Jane Austen book. I think it is my favorite, right up there with the other one, Persuasion. Lady Susan is a widow who engages in quite some shenanigans. She has a daughter that she wants to marry off to a man that her daughter just does not like at all. She engages in extra marital affairs. I mean, she's a widow, but still at the time, and the man is married. And she is quite a piece of work. She's not a sympathetic character, but I loved her. I loved the way that Jane Austen portrayed her. And this was actually the first book that Austen wrote when she was 20. And then it was not published until after her death. And I'm amazed how she can write such a fantastic, non-likable character, but still something that, somebody whom I really enjoyed reading about. So Lady Susan was a big surprise for me. I did not expect to love that book so much. So that was really, really nice. The next category in the tops is always the book that I thought about the most, and I will have to look at I don't think I have the time anyway when the book was published. I'm a bit disorganized. I haven't done the tops and flops in quite some time, 2014 anyway. So this was Mary Costello, Academy Street, published in 2014, and it was shortlisted for the Costa Prize. It doesn't exist anymore, the Costa, for first novel, I think. I read this together with Kim. Oh, by the way, I read Lady Susan with Heidi, which was extra fun because she also enjoyed Lady Susan a lot, and also because she bought the book in Amsterdam when we met there. So that was double fun. And I read this with Kim from Middle of the Book March. And I don't think Kim liked the book that much. And yeah, it was not a favorite book. I think in Goodreads terms, it was a 3.5 star read. So it was not a book that I thought was brilliant. But sometimes it happens that books that I don't even think are that fantastic still stick with me, and I think about them a lot. I don't know whether that happens to you. It's not only and always the fantastic books that I remember, and remember in a good way. So this one is quite a short book about the life of Tess Lohan is her last name, an Irish, Mary Costello is an Irish author, born in Ireland, Tess Lohan, but then moving to the US. And it is her whole life in these short little pages. It is a very kind of bird's view, detached way of telling the life. And I had definite issues with the book. The first part about Tess as a child, opening when her mom died, is compared to the rest of the 60 odd years that follow really long. So I thought it was imbalanced. But still, the character of Tess, that life of this ordinary woman, whose life took turns by events that she did not control, like all of us, life happens when you're busy making other plans. That is true for all of us. But I was just, thinking about what it means to be a female this is set in the past sometime, having to move to a foreign country, the way things happen to her that really give her life a certain direction. So for some reasons, I had read other books. The Stone Diaries come to mind, of course, about a book about a woman's life, where the life, there's no plot, but the life is sort of the plot of the book. And like I said, it was not my favorite read. I definitely saw the flaws in the book, the imbalance that I already mentioned. She packed a bit too much in this very short book. I felt there were a couple of characters that what happened to them, the family, the sister, that I thought, that was done because you needed the character to go a certain direction. So, like I said, not a perfect book by any means, but still, it stuck with me and made me think about how life develops and how certain events shape our life. So that was that. The third category in the tops is always the best nonfiction. And that was actually quite a hard one because I read quite a bit of really, really good nonfiction. And it was a difficult choice, but in the end, I picked this one, Kate Zernike's The Exceptions, Nancy Hopkins and the Fight for Women in Science, that was published earlier this year. 2023, I think in February. Kate Zernike is a science journalist, and this book is, I'm looking at the book, that doesn't tell me. This book is about a particular scientist, Nancy Hopkins, who worked at MIT. She's still alive. She started her career in the 1950s, 1960s, and it is just what it says on the cover. The one life as a central point, Nancy Hopkins, a female scientist in the second half of the 20th century. The book goes up to the 1990s. So it really covers the whole second part of the 20th century and what women had to put up with in order to make a career in science. And it's just, first of all, it's infuriating because it's not that it's the problem are in the 1950s and 1960s. You expect that. Oh, no, 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 no. When we come up to the 1970s, 80s, 90s, it's not that much better, I can tell you. And the detail that Zernike tells us about this particular life, but it's much broader, of course, than that, because she uses Nancy Hopkins' life to show us something about women in science at MIT in particular, but broadly in the US. And I mean, it could have been anywhere. So I love that. I also love that it was not, it was very critical about the patriarchal system and what it does to women, especially in the sciences, but it was not bitter. You know, she had humor in the book, and it was just very well told. I learned a lot, and especially Nancy Hopkins as a character. I loved how I got to know her. So if you are interested at all in science, women in science, if you have a feminist streak somewhere, this book is a recommendation, a wholehearted recommendation. So this was great. Okay, those were the tops. On to the flops. My first flop is not, I'm not going to review it because it was a DNF. One of the very few DNFs that I had this year. Just as in parentheses about DNFs, I don't count books as DNFs if I download a Kindle sample because I might be interested in the book and I read the first 20 or 30 pages or whatever you get when you download a Kindle sample and decide this is not a book for me. That I don't count as a DNF. A DNF for me is when I decide to read the book and then abandon it. And one of the books that I abandoned was actually another buddy read with Kim from Middle of the Book March, and we both DNF'd it, and that was not Vintage Bowen, but Elizabeth Bowen, The Heat of the Day, published first in 1948. And Elizabeth Bowen is on my 1001 books by women that I have to read before I die list. This book was on the list. It got bumped off the list because I DNF'd it. So, but I still have to put another Elizabeth Bowen on the list. So if you have a favorite Elizabeth Bowen, not being The Heat of the Day and maybe different than The Heat of the Day in terms of writing, let me know down in the comments. I DNF'd this book. It's about it's wartime London, and the carelessness of people with no future flows through the evening air. Stella discovers that her lover Robert is suspected of selling information to the enemy, and Harrison, the British intelligence agent, on his trail. Plot ensues from there. That sounded really interesting. I did not get along with the writing at all. Very choppy, didn't flow for me at all. It was, for me, such a chore to read a page that after 20 pages, I thought, no, I'm going to abandon it. And that rarely ever happens. I mean, I DNF books. That's not what I mean, but because of the writing, because I could not get along with the writing, that happens once in a blue moon. Writing is not, I don't like clunky sentences, but it's not the main dry for me to read a book. It's mostly the plot and the characters. And if the writing is okay and doesn't bother me and doesn't distract me, then I'm fine. So the fact that I just could not read this book because I did not like the writing, that's that doesn't happen often, like I said. So this is definitely in the flops because it was such a disappointment. I was looking forward to Elizabeth Bowen, and it just didn't work. So let me know which one of her books I should try in order to put her back in the 1001 list. The other one on the flops was more of a meh. And again, I have to mention Kim because it was one of her picks, I think in June, for her Blind Eyed Book Club, where she picks a book from her bookshelf that has been on the shelf for a long time, and then she has a Voxer group, and there's a group of people reading the book together. And this book had been on my shelf also for a very long time, and that was Jhumpa Lahiri, There's a Bit of a Glare, The Namesake. This book was one of her, I think it was her second book, 2004. Yes, it was her second book, just after The Interpreter of Melodies. It's a comparable book to Academy Street because it's a whole life, and it's the life of one particular man. I forgot his real name, but his nickname or his given name is then Gogol, and we learn why his father named him after the Russian writer, and it's the life of an immigrant family and the expectations that are put on the two children, Gogol and his sister. And it just goes, meandering along his life, and it's not bad. And the writing is okay. Like I said, hardly ever that big of an issue for me. But I put the book down and immediately forgot it. It was just not sticking with me at all. It was like kind of, reading something fluffy, like sugar spin fluff in a nice color. And yeah, and it's one of the, I think it was the third or fourth try with Jhumpa Lahiri. I decided she is just not an author for me. It doesn't work for me for whatever reason. I don't know. So if The Namesake is one of your favorite books, happy for you, good for you. But for me, it just didn't work. And I don't think I will try another Jhumpa Lahiri. So there you have it, my tops and flops of the month of June and July. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that I picked up the tops and flops again. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.